Are you falling victim to the planning gap? Now, many investors believe because they have an investment portfolio that's doing well, they're on track to achieve their future goals. But here's the uncomfortable truth. An investment portfolio is not a plan. And that's where I see so many people fall into what I call the planning gap. The planning gap is investment-only focus as opposed to holistic wealth management. And it can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. Not because your investments are underperforming, but because no one's looking at the bigger picture. My name is Quinton Chambers. I'm a certified financial planner, chartered investment manager, and wealth advisor. And in today's video, we're going to talk about the planning gap, 5 key areas that it impacts, and what you can do about it. Now, one of the main metrics people use for financial success and longevity is the health of their investment portfolio, which stocks, bonds, or funds they own, their asset allocation, and in this case, the returns become the only scoreboard. But this often leaves out everything else that impacts your financial life, like retirement income planning, tax optimization, estate planning, risk management, all these things, and making sure that you have a coordinated plan between your legal and tax professionals. And that's a planning gap. And if you're receiving investment-only advice, or you're a DIYer who's managing their own investment portfolio, and the performance is your only key metric for financial health, you're likely paying for it in ways that you're not even aware of. And this isn't just my opinion. So let's talk about what the research says. So let's start with Vanguard. They did a study called the Advisor's Alpha. They found that by working with an advisor who does comprehensive planning and integrates things like rebalancing, tax strategies, and behavioral coaching, it can add almost 3% of net annual value to your overall financial picture. And that 3% doesn't come from picking better stocks, it comes from planning. Then we have Morningstar that did a study on retirement income strategies. They found by optimizing things like your withdrawals, your account use, and your product allocation, it can increase your sustainable retirement income by 22 to 29%. That's almost a third more income in retirement without having to chase higher returns. And right here in Canada, we have Financial Planning Canada, who found that people with a comprehensive written financial plan are twice as confident at achieving their major life goals in contrast to those that don't have one. So I think the message here is clear. An investment-only focus is not enough. Without proper planning, you're leaving both money and peace of mind on the table. So let's talk about the 5 biggest areas that you're likely missing out on if you're receiving investment-only advice, or if you're a DIYer and investment performance is your only metric. First is going to be retirement income planning. Now, obviously the goal with your investments is to grow them so that eventually you're going to be able to live off them. Now, it's especially important to remember that if you have an RRSP, eventually you're going to have to convert it to a RRIF. And having a strategy for this is going to be so important, and you can only think about this in context to your broader financial picture. In addition to this, you also have to think about CPP and OAS. When you start, your Social Security benefits are going to be extremely important, as there's penalties to taking it early and benefits to delaying it. But it's all about understanding how that fits your specific circumstance. Then we have protecting yourself from sequence of return risk. This idea is essentially that when you retire versus when someone else retires, you're going to have different investment experience depending on where the market was at that time. What this means is if you and someone else had the exact same investment balance, but you started at the beginning of a rising market and they started at the beginning of a falling market, your end balance and ultimately how long that portfolio will last you will be disproportionately different. All of this is important because these are just some of the factors that you have to consider beyond your investment portfolio when planning for things like retirement income. Second is going to be tax optimization, and this is where I see huge leaks. A simple example here is putting the right investments in the right accounts. So let's talk about US paying dividends. If you have that in TFSA, you're automatically losing 15% to withholding tax. The underutilization of your tax-free savings account or your TFSA. Another example would be having high income products like GICs within a taxable account, which is likely unnecessarily increasing your tax bill. These mistakes could easily cost you 1 to 2% per year. That's like voluntarily giving up a third of your after-tax returns. Third is going to be estate and legacy. Many families have solid investment portfolios, but they have outdated wills, mismatched beneficiaries. This is when CRA becomes the biggest beneficiary at your death. Fourth is going to be risk management. Investments don't protect against everything. What happens if you get sick, you can't work, or you need long-term care? I've seen families with great portfolios have to sell at the worst times because they didn't have the right insurance. Then we have number 5, which is professional coordination. If your lawyer, accountant, and financial advisor aren't speaking, then things slip through the cracks. Maybe your accountant has a plan to minimize taxes this year, but plans to increase it for your estate later down the road. Or your lawyer drafts a will that isn't aligned with your investment structure. Without a quarterback, your team isn't playing the same game. And last is professional coordination. You want to make sure your legal, tax, investment, and insurance professionals are all working collectively towards your benefit. And in addition to that, you should have a clear service plan so that you know exactly when you meet, what gets covered, and what gets done. This is how you close a planning gap and how you make sure your wealth works in real life, not just on paper. So let me leave you with this. If you're working with an advisor who only does investment-only advice, you don't know what true wealth management feels like. Now, if you're interested in learning more, I'm going to leave a few self-assessment tools down below, or as always, you can reach out to me through my website. Because at the end of the day, it's It's not about chasing returns. It's about building a life you want with clarity, confidence, and control.